podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Salah. Escape Cancelo. Oh, it's brilliant from Mo Salah. And still, Salah. Oh, sensational! Son had a goal and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne. And it is Wood-Prowse. Martinelli, gorgeous. Still going up. Oh, he's done it again.
And City have won the Premier League.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, EPL Index proudly brings to you the best prediction podcast in the world, A Tad Predictable, with your host, Tadiwa Chanakira, and his guest, Jake Jackman.
It's Game Week 24, and you know what that means. It's time for another brand new episode of A Tad Predictable. It's back to business now. The transfer window is officially over. Teams now, whatever you have, that's it. You have to make do until the end of the season. Try and finish as high up the table as you possibly can. I am joined by Newcastle fan, resident of A Tad Predictable, Jake Jackman. Jake, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on again. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, should be a good one. I know both of our teams didn't necessarily get the results they were hoping for this weekend. This past weekend, but heading into the next weekend, unfamiliar territory for both of our teams, having pretty much 7 days to prepare for a game. Is that a relief for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I think it would be good to get back to playing fewer matches. We had our time in the Champions League and playing those matches, and we obviously saw what that did to the squad, proving it wasn't quite ready. But hopefully now we're down to just a game a week. We should be able to get back to our best. Hopefully, fingers crossed, especially with players coming back as well. And yeah, I think that'll be the case for some other teams as well. So yeah, hopefully we'll see Newcastle improve a lot over the coming weeks.
Speaking of getting back to their best, let's start the weekend off with the first fixture. It's Man City versus Everton. It's that 12:30 kickoff. Look, with Man City games, especially at the Etihad at this time of the season, most of the talk is about damage control if you're the opposition and trying to keep the goal line difference respectable. Do you see Everton causing Man City more problems than just that?
I think with Man City, they always do give up. They do always give you a chance. We've seen that in the last few weeks. I don't think they've kept many clean sheets in the last couple of months. They always seem to give up chances, and quite often they're quite big chances too. So yeah, I think against anybody, you always fancy the opposition having a chance against City. That the problem is going the other way. It seems that they are finding their stride now. Obviously, De Bruyne's back and showing some great form. Haaland came back into start 11 on Monday. There was definitely some ring rust there, but he's only going to, we know what he brings, and he's a guarantee. No worries about him. And then Foden getting a hat-trick just shows that they're not even reliant on just those two players, but I think we've come to learn that anyway. So yeah, I would expect Everton to have a chance or two this weekend. I think at home City are stronger and their defence is stronger, but they still give up a chance or two. But Everton are a team that do struggle to score goals. Obviously, they got 2 last week against Tottenham, but before then they had been goalless in a few games. So yeah, I'd expect them to have a chance or two, but I just don't really think they'll have the clinical edge to take them. And City going the other end just look like they're hitting their stride. So I'm pretty confident that City will win this one quite comfortably. I'll say 2-0, but it will be a very comfortable 2-0.
Yeah, I think that's the big issue for me with Everton is not being able to put the ball in the back of the net. Having your number 9 striker, your main striker, not in form. He gets a goal taken away from him this past weekend. That's not going to help his confidence. Hopefully they just give it to him to psychologically try and get him going this season. But yeah, for me, I think City are ramping up slowly into form. You mentioned the fact that De Bruyne is back. He's looking to ramp up his minutes. Haaland, yes, a bit of rustiness there, especially that chance when you're through on goal. Most people would have expected him to finish when he's coming into the box on the right-hand side there. but those things will come with more game time, and I'm sure he'll be back to devastating form. I think a home game, enough time to prep for this one for City. I've gone 3-0, a bit more aggressive than you, but I can see them continuing to put the pressure on a Liverpool side that obviously we'll be talking about sooner or later. But let's move on first to Fulham versus Bournemouth. Obviously, from a Fulham perspective, that 2-2 draw against Burnley last time out, and then obviously when it comes to Bournemouth, I think not too long ago they were the informed team in the Premier League. A couple of results haven't necessarily gone their way. You know, you talk about that 1-1 draw with Nottingham Forest. Arguably, at home, Bournemouth would have been thinking that's a game we need to win, despite the recent rise of Nottingham Forest in the last couple of weeks. I think this could be a good game. You'd hope Breuer gets more minutes, gets more ingrained into that Fulham team. But I'm going to put Bournemouth away from home with Dominic Solanke, who's due another big game in terms of fantasy points. I'm going to go 2-1 to Bournemouth.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. Fulham, I think, have been very inconsistent. They've had some good games. Obviously got knocked out of both cups in quick succession, and that's been a bit of a body blow. There's still a few injuries there. I know Jimenez is doubtful for the next few weeks at least. And yeah, they did sign Broja, which it will be interesting to see if he comes into the team and what he offers. They'll be hoping he's as successful as their last sort of Scandinavian striker. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that goes. Bournemouth, I think, have been quite an informed team, but they just seem to be struggling just to kill off matches. It does seem that they're very reliant on Solanke for goals, and that can happen sometimes. These teams lower down the league can sometimes be reliant on one player or a couple of players for goals. But I do think they've been playing some good football. So yeah, it's a tough game to call. Fulham obviously didn't hold on last week, so maybe there's some concerns there. But they do seem to be better at home. They do seem to play better football at home. So yeah, it's a really tight game to call this one. There's sort of two teams that you'd expect to be in mid-table. Neither of them have got that much hope of climbing into that top half or have any fears of being pulled into the bottom three. So yeah, it's a tight game to call. I think I'm going to go for the same score as last week for Fulham. I think it's going to be a 2-2, but I think it could be quite an entertaining one.
That would be quite a fun game. Let's move on to aforementioned Liverpool. They will be hosting Burnley. Now, I think it's fair to say that was a disappointing performance from Liverpool last time out at the Emirates against Arsenal. A big game, trying to extend the gap at the top of the table. What were your thoughts on how that Liverpool team looked and what we can expect from them against Burnley?
Yeah, I was hopeful that Liverpool might go to Arsenal and get something. They seem to be the full team, the way they sort of dominated Chelsea just a few days prior. They looked really good, created so many chances. Maybe in reflection, that was more to do with Chelsea than it was to do with Liverpool that day. We obviously know how reliant they're on Mo Salah, and he's still a big miss. Diaz, Nunes, and Jota have all shown good performances during this run, but none of them are at the level of Salah. So yeah, that's one that continues to be missing. I think Szoboszlai was quite a big miss too. They didn't seem to have that control in midfield. Arsenal seemed to have to run a bit in there. Jorginho played especially well, and it just seemed that Liverpool just didn't quite have the profile of player to dominate that away from home. But this weekend, I didn't think we're going to have the same issue. I think even without Salah again, if he's not available, then they should be fine. Burnley, I think most people are expecting them to go straight back down now. They do seem to concede a lot of high quality chances, and Liverpool at home just seem to run rampant at the moment. I can't see them dropping any more points at Anfield for the rest of the season. So yeah, I think this should be comfortable for Burnley, for Liverpool, against Burnley. And like City as well, Liverpool do give up a chance, so maybe we'll see Burnley get one, but I think this should be quite comfortable. I think I'll go 3-1 to Liverpool. And yeah, they'll still give up that goal as they seem to do, but they'll have enough to win the game.
Yeah, in terms of certainly confidence at Anfield, Liverpool seem to have that in bags. Just to elaborate on that Arsenal performance, I think I would be more worried if Liverpool's performance was really good and they just couldn't handle Arsenal. Then maybe there's a bit more concern, but everyone just seemed to play really badly in that game. Alisson and Van Dijk making mistakes. That's rare for them to make mistakes. So you'd assume, they're making a mistake in this one. You're not going to see one for another 15, 20 games, from them. That's sort of the caliber of players that they are. You highlighted the fact that Salah was missing despite the commentators ignoring that fact the entire game. But obviously, considering how good he is, that is a major factor in him not being available. But yeah, I think for Liverpool, it was a horrible game in terms of performance levels. I don't think they can have any excuses in terms of the effort that was given in that one, apart from maybe the amount of games that they've played. I think it was in the last 34 games, 34 days, Liverpool had played 7 games. Arsenal had played 3. And it looked like it in that game. And I'm sure you as a Newcastle fan can appreciate, when the games rack up, the team not performing at the levels, at least in terms of effort, that you would expect. Obviously, you're not going to win every game in the Premier League. Only one team has gone where they haven't lost a game. It's going to happen. You're going to have bad performances. More so this season, when it looks like the league will be won with around mid 80 points opposed to the 90s that we've become accustomed to with the standards that City have set in recent years. So it's one of those, hopefully, from a Liverpool perspective, they quickly forget about it, rest up, recover, move on to the next games, and focus on trying to give City a run for their money this season. Burnley, you wouldn't expect them to have too many issues with that one. I've gone 2-0 to Liverpool. I wonder if it's going to be one of those where Liverpool control the game for a lot of the time, but don't necessarily finish their chances. Certainly, if a lot of them fall to Darwin Núñez, we've seen him hit the post way too many times this season. But yeah, I think 2-0 is a decent scoreline. Burnley, from their perspective, it feels like just starting to gear for next season, figuring out, is Company going to be the one we're going to keep next season to try and bring us straight back up? How's the team going to shape up for next season? This is not a game that I think they can look to target to pick up points. It's just one of those away from home against one of the best teams in the league. It's going to be tough for them. They'll try to pick up points elsewhere throughout the rest of the season. Let's move on to Luton versus Sheffield United. You're obviously quite familiar with Luton, having played them last weekend. Were you impressed with what you saw from them? And then obviously Sheffield United, similar to Burnley, one of those teams that looks like they're heading in one direction, and that's back to the Championship.
Yeah, Luton were good last week. Obviously, to score 8 goals against Brighton and Newcastle in the same week is obviously very well done. There's not many teams that do that. And they did play with sort of an aggressive game plan. They were very loose at the back. Really, on another day, Newcastle probably should have had the game won in the first half, but they didn't, and Luton were there to take advantage. They did seem to really pick their battles on the pitch. They really targeted Dan Burn, which was intelligent, and you could see that there was a real tactical plan, which, sometimes with teams, you don't really see that. You just sort of see teams sort of go out, try and defend deep, or, just go out and go through the motions and hope for the best. Whereas Luton, they did definitely have a designated game plan, and you saw the fruits of that and the way they scored 4 goals. I think it was partly Luton played very well, partly Newcastle sort of taking it for granted. But yeah, you've got to give credit to Luton. And I think the way they the way they're playing at the moment is just so aggressive and front foot that you've got to praise them and got to admire them. You'd think they won't be too reliant on their away result. So last week was definitely a bonus. This is the one that they'd have penciled in for 3 points. And yeah, judging the way the two teams played last week, obviously one conceding 5, one scoring 4. You've got to think there's only going to be one result, but sometimes it doesn't play out that way. Sheffield United would have also earmarked with fixtures, a massive one they really have to win if they're going to have any chance. But yeah, it's difficult to see them doing that. I think the difference between the two teams is just Luton have just got a couple of players that have got that experience and that Premier League quality, especially Ross Barkley. I think the last couple of weeks he's been exceptional, and has really proven that he's still got what it takes to play at this level. Maybe he's enjoying being the talisman of the team at the bottom of the table, but he's playing so well, and you'd think that they'll win this game. I don't think they'll be scoring 4 again, but I think that they'll win it quite comfortably. I think 2-0 to Luton will be my prediction for this one. And yeah, I think that they're really building up a head of steam. And if you are the likes of Palace, Brentford, Everton, you've got to be slightly concerned about what they're doing, because it does seem like there's a real threat that one of those promoted teams that came up last year isn't going to go straight back down. Whereas, a couple of months ago, it looked like all 3 were destined to go back down. So yeah, now the likes of Palace, Brentford, Forest, Everton will be really concerned about Luton, and I think they'll increase the pressure on those said teams at the weekend with another win. As
you say, like they've been very aggressive, and then you add in the Kenilworth Road factor as well. I'm not optimistic for Sheffield United in this one. What are your thoughts on Bertrand Diaz? Obviously, he's come in. He's looked lively. We know his journey to Spain didn't necessarily bear fruit the way he wanted to, but he's back in in English football in the Premier League this time around. He was linked with a couple of Premier League teams over the past couple of seasons. Ends up at Sheffield United. It seems like it's not going to be a long stint in the Premier League if he's to stay with Sheffield United. Do you think he's putting enough tape down to possibly get a move to stay in the Premier League if Sheffield United go down?
Definitely, it's still early days. You want to judge him for the rest of the season, but he started well. He's obviously scoring goals. He does look a real threat, and he just looks confident in the way he's taking on shots. Taking shots on the one against Palace was so early outside the area. It was really nicely taken on. It just shows the confidence he's got in his own ability. It could easily have been quite badly stung by what happened at Villarreal, but he's obviously come back still confident in himself, and yeah, he's scoring goals. And if you score goals in the Premier League, you're always gonna have a chance of staying here. Sheffield United obviously probably want to keep him when they stay up or go down, but yeah, if he gets a few more before the end of the season, I'm sure there'll be other Premier League clubs looking at him, or perhaps ones that are going to come up this year that will be looking at him. Unless Villarreal really want to have another look themselves, I think they've got a new manager coming in, or at least they've had a managerial change since he went there. So he's got all to play for. But yeah, the more goals he scores, the better for him in the short term, especially.
I agree with you there. And the reason I brought him up specifically, because I've got a 3-1 score prediction here. I think Luton go and win it, but I think Diaz continues that goal scoring form he's shown for Sheffield United so far this season. He's playing for a Premier League career, I think, this season. And despite what happens with Sheffield United, if he can put on tape good performances, get lots of goals, I think he's someone that's going to be a smart signing for any of the teams, that can see themselves being lower down on the table next season. If you can add a couple more goals into your team with a guy like him, that can be invaluable in terms of whether or not you stay up or, try and go a bit higher up the table. Let's move on to maybe one of the teams or 2 teams that were slightly more busier than everyone else in the transfer window that's just gone by. Tottenham versus Brighton. Tottenham, they obviously did quite a bit of business in the winter, and that's obviously respectively speaking when you consider how little business the Premier League did. They get into that game against Everton. It's the early kickoff. Look like they're cruising to a win in that one. End up drawing 2-2. What were your thoughts on their performance in that one? And then from a Brighton perspective, they had to respond to what happened to them in midweek. And boy, did they. That 4-1 win in a derby is a great way to respond. And lastly, if you want to touch on the Vicario incidents that have been happening, where teams seem to be targeting him from set pieces, I don't know if you've got an opinion on that.
So I think that Tottenham are sort of finding form that I think is more consistent to them. now. So what you'd expect from them, they obviously ran very hot at the start of the season. There was talk of a title challenge, so that was definitely premature. But now that, they're looking like a team that you'd expect them to be, they're sort of quite good at home, playing attractive football. Maybe struggling a little bit away. I thought Everton definitely deserved a point, if not more, on that day. They created so many chances. Tottenham were clinical. Richarlison especially seemed to be in a really good vein of form. But I think this is more what you'd expect from Tottenham. I think we'll see them get plenty of wins, but also drop points as well, especially away from home. So I'd expect that to be the way Tottenham's season progresses. Brighton, they've had a really poor run in the league, really. Prior to last week, I think they came against Palace at a good time. It seems to be really going poorly for Hodgson at Palace, but it's an important win. It'll be a confidence booster, and they'll definitely go to Tottenham and play attacking football. Like Tottenham will play their way, so it should be a really good game to watch. I'd expect goals in this one. I think Tottenham will probably win, but I think Brighton will score as well. I'd say maybe 3-2. I think it could be a really, really good game. I think I'll go 3-2 for Tottenham. On Vicaria, I think it's something that we're going to continue to see. Once something gets shown by one team, every team will try to do it. So it's up to him to become more confident punching. I think that's what his problem is. He doesn't seem to be comfortable punching the ball. So he just seems to either wants to catch it or doesn't want to go for it. And I think he needs to get more confident punching the ball, because that would help him. Or Tottenham need to defend better and protect him, which I don't think we've been seeing from them. But I think we'll continue to see teams target it. Brighton obviously got some big centre backs. Dunk scored last week, so they'll look to exploit that too. But I think it'll be a really good game. But I think Tottenham will edge it.
There's no reason for teams not to target it at this point in time. And I was baffled by Everton in the second half, deciding not to employ that tactic they were doing in the first half as much as they should have, in my opinion. As you mentioned, either Spurs need to help protect him better, or he needs to become more confident, because as the rules stand in the league, and maybe it's something they'll look at the end of the season, he's got no claim here. He has to either be stronger, come in, clear the ball, or Spurs have to put a player between Vicario and the other person that's trying to obstruct him. Just get a body there so that there's at least some degree of separation, and he has some sort of space to run and get a running start to attack some of these corners that are coming in. I think this game's going to be fun. I think low-key it could steal game of the weekend, because we got a team in Brighton that like to wrestle possession away from you. We've got a team in Spurs that don't know how to do anything other than just attack. It's going to be very, very fun. My issue with Spurs at the moment, and it's definitely something that's going to come over time, is I don't know if they can control the game, if they can put their foot on the ball and sort of just dictate the pace of a game. It seems to either be all out attack, or, it's coming straight back at us and we have to defend. And that's going to make this game really interesting for me, them not being able to control the game. I've gone 4-3. I've gone slightly higher than you in this one. I'm hoping for a really good game. I've gone 4-3 to Spurs. So Spurs obviously end up winning it, but I think it's going to be a fun game. It's one of a plethora of games that are on at 3:00, Jake. And if you want to be able to watch it in the UK, you don't have many options unless you link up with Liberty Shield. Obviously, this podcast is presented by EPLindex.com in association with Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN service, very easy to install, really easy to use, and has a whole host of features. It can be used on multiple devices, whether you're traveling and you don't want to get locked out of your bank account, or you want to be safe whilst using public Wi-Fi, which is a big thing nowadays. If you want to unlock geo-locked content, or you just want to protect your online data, then Liberty Shield is definitely for you. One of my favorite uses of it is simply to unlock content. That's putting myself in a different part of the world to unlock content that I wouldn't be able to get otherwise here in the UK. You guys can use it for stuff like Netflix, or, to unlock geo-locked films. We know not all the EPL games are shown on TV in the UK, and Liberty Shield is a great way to still watch every single EPL game. If you guys go to Liberty Shield and use the coupon code EPL25, you'll get 25% off. That's off of either the router or the software VPN, with the software VPN downloading straight onto your devices. So it's really quick, really easy. I highly, highly recommend it. And we obviously thank them for sponsoring the show. Jake, before we come on to what has been the transfer window and your thoughts on Newcastle and maybe the lack of business and how they're set up for the rest of the season and maybe the summer if we want to look a bit further ahead, we'll just go to a short break and then we'll be back with Jake to sort of answer those burning questions with regards to Newcastle and how they're standing. We'll be right back after this short break. And we are back. Jake, talk to me about Newcastle. I mean, heading into the window, probably before this whole issue that we've seen with Everton and Nottingham Forest with sustainability, profit and sustainability issues, Newcastle were probably one of the teams that were touted as going to be quite busy, maybe do some interesting business to push on and try and secure Champions League football for a second year in a row.
Yeah, I think that any hopes of getting Champions League football went quite a long time ago, and I think that they're just sort of happy to try and see what the season what can be salvaged. But I think it is difficult. It's not only but the injuries and the fatigue's going to have a lasting impact. We're seeing that especially late in games that we're not really be able to close them out. Even now we're not playing as often. We've still not really got the bench options, and that's been a huge turning point in the City game. They brought on De Bruyne and whereas we didn't bring anybody on and we couldn't do anything. So yeah, this sort of became a really difficult last 20 minutes, and it's been the case last season where we've conceded a lot of late goals because we haven't had the people to bring on. I hope that is slightly easing up. Obviously, Harvey Barnes came back last week. Wilson's back. I think Gordon's injury doesn't look too bad, so maybe he'll play at the weekend or be on the bench. Willock and Anderson are close as well, so hopefully just having the players back will help us have a good end to the season. But it is sort of difficult. We've fixed our away form somewhat. We went away to Fulham in the FA Cup and won. We went away to Villa and won last week. But it seems our home form has taken a bit of a hit in return. Obviously losing it against Forest and Man City, and then drawing at Luton, being 4-2 down, conceding 7 goals at home against Luton and Nottingham Forest isn't good enough, really. So there does seem to be issues. I think it's partly down to the fatigue, partly down to injuries, partly down to a lack of confidence. Obviously, losing that many games in succession is going to take a hit to your confidence. I think we're seeing that we're not playing as fluidly as we were last season. But I think it's just a massive learning curve for the coaches and the players. I think getting back to one game week is going to help us. I think the way we played against Villa was very good. The way we came back into Luton shows that they're still fighting the squad. Then yeah, they're still fighting. I think if you look at the league table, I think we're 9th. So yeah, we're well placed to sort of go for those European spots. I think if you look at goal difference as well, I think we've got the 6th best goal difference, which is normally quite a good indicator of how good you are as a team. So we'd hopefully push up that table. We're 3 points behind West Ham, 2 points behind Brighton. I think they're the two teams you really need to target. They can have European football coming back soon. We've got to really target taking over those two teams and finishing at least in the top 7. Manchester United are 5 points above us at the moment. We probably hope that we can try and compete with them too. But they seem to, they're going to benefit from not having Europe like us. So also seem to getting players back and playing a little bit better. So we'll see on that one. But yeah, I think the target for Newcastle is to really finish at least in the top 7, get European football of some description, and then just, take a lot of lessons from this year, both in terms of squad building, managing of players. I think even with all the injuries, Eddie Howe could have done a little bit more to manage the players better. and maybe just some slight tweaks to the style of play to maybe make it less conducive to injuries. Maybe invest in the medical department. Maybe decrease the average age of the squad. I think we've got one of the highest average ages. That's something that we've got to improve. There's plenty to learn on, but I think the club talk about winning trophies. Maybe they'll do that one day, but it's going to take a long time to get there. And I think last year, slightly inflated expectations, both internally from Newcastle fans, but also externally. Like, I think neutrals are probably slightly surprised to see Newcastle down in 8th, but in 9th, but also they're probably surprised to see Newcastle 4th last year. Maybe there's slightly more that's been expected from us. But yeah, if we do win at the weekend and West Ham and Brighton don't win, we could be 7th. And after the run we've been on, we'd probably say it's a good position to be in. We're in the 6th round in the 5th round of the FA Cup against Blackburn. So you think that's a game that we'd probably be hoping to win, and then we'll be in the last 8 of the FA Cup if we do that. So there's still plenty to play for this season. But I think, and also we've played Liverpool, Manchester City, and Aston Villa twice already. That's 3 of the top 4. We've played twice, so our fixtures are going to be slightly kinder than a lot of those around us. And with no Europe as well, you'd still be quite hopeful of Newcastle finishing strongly. But yeah, I think if we finish 7th, finish in the top 7, and then try and get into that, try and go as far into the FA Cup as possible, possibly even win it, because I think the way the fixtures fall is around other European games. So, if we did beat Blackburn and then maybe we got drawn against, I don't know, Liverpool or Manchester City or Manchester United, maybe not Manchester United, but what either Liverpool or Manchester City at home, and it fell before a Champions League game or a crucial Premier League game, maybe we'd fancy our chances on taking that in a one-off game. We've knocked City out of the Carabao Cup this season in similar fashion. So yeah, maybe we'd fancy ourselves in a game against any team in that competition. So yeah, we've got to hope to finish strongly in the league, try and finish at least in the top 7, and then try and go for that FA Cup. I think we're definitely well placed to do that.
I think the good thing about this season is you can have a run like Newcastle had and still have a chance to get into Europe this season. Jake, for me, I think you touched on something a bit earlier on that I'm going to be looking out for, which is growth in terms of Eddie Howe, the team, the club, player management in terms of rotating players, playing the likes of Anthony Gordon until their wheels fall off and then continuing to play them just baffles me. And it's not like Eddie Howe's the only manager that does that. It's not like it's due to a lack of experience in European football, because one of my biggest issues with Klopp is he does that. Dominic Szoboszlai is obviously injured now. I think it was back in November, Liverpool had already used up about 80% of, or if not 70 to 80% of his available minutes. If you look at his average minutes that he plays in a season, that starts obviously from Simon Brundish, who does a great job keeping all of that kind of stuff on record there at Anfield Index with Under Pressure podcast. But that stuff shouldn't be happening at this level. And as I said, it's not like it's Eddie Howe, it's the lack of experience and stuff. Yes, that's a factor, but we need to see improvement from that then. Otherwise, you'll end up like a Klopp where it continues to be one of those things that ails you come the business end of the season when you're starting to win, when you want to be winning trophies and the team is just flat. They don't have, that energy in their legs. They've kind of been burnt out throughout the whole season. So that's one thing I want to see from Newcastle. I'm curious to hear from you if the team was challenging for top 4 or closer to top 4, whether or not Newcastle would have spent money, or was it just the concerns that many clubs have at the moment, which is that grey area of what counts as being an exception in this profit and sustainability era and what isn't, which seems to be what caught Everton out and why they ended up being looking to appeal the matter. Is they were saying some of the money that the Premier League counted against them is actually money that should be in that exception bracket, which the Premier League created, that allowed teams to spend a bit more than maybe we would have expected.
Yeah, I don't think Newcastle would have strengthened whatever would have happened. I think they've been pretty clear in that they're quite restricted by the profit and sustainability rules. They don't want to be seen to break them. I think what Newcastle are trying to do is change the rules. I think there've been discussions on that this week, and it's easier to come at a point of trying to change the rules if you're not seen to be breaking them already. So I think they're very, very conscious of that. I think in the summer they'll probably go heavier, and there'll probably be a lot of movement out of the club to facilitate movement in. I think the way that PSR works as well is that the money from the Champions League hasn't yet to sort of come onto the club's books. Also, a lot of the sponsorships that they've done, the new deal with Adidas is quite lucrative compared to the previous sponsor, but that's also not in the accounts yet. So I think next year we'll see movement from Newcastle, having bigger revenues, being able to spend more, also moving players out. So I think the summer could be quite big. But yeah, I think in this January they just wanted to be seen to be kept to be talking about PSR, trying to sort of put their case across to sort of relax those rules softly. And yeah, if they're not breaking the rules, it's much easier to come across and sort of have a real stake in that discussion. If Newcastle were in course to break the rules, then they're trying to fix them, trying to relax them. It would seem it's quite a self-serving act, even if it still is already. I think that Newcastle aren't alone in their views on the way that the PSL works in the Premier League. I don't think it's a Newcastle problem. And I think that we'll probably see some sort of relaxation. Whether that is just, I don't think, I don't know in what form that will come. Maybe, these rules were created 10 years ago. Maybe there'll be some sort of adjustment for inflation. Maybe there'll be some sort of adjustment for something else. I'm not sure. But, yeah, I think that they will change. But yeah, I think in January, Newcastle just didn't want to be seen to be breaking those rules in ahead of what was to be done in sort of discussions in Premier League meetings.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I'll leave it at this, in that I think going into next season, if Newcastle can finish in that 7th spot, go into a European competition, I think that would be great practice for where Newcastle want to end up. Because obviously the be all and end all for clubs is to get into those Champions League spots with the lucrative money that's involved there at the moment. If you're not aiming to win the league, at least get into the Champions League. We get all that. But I think Newcastle want to be one of the dominant clubs in the Premier League. And obviously the owners, when they bought the club and came in, that's sort of the ambition that they've set. I think being able to manage, and obviously this will help Eddie Howe, hopefully with his growth and experience, is being able to manage that European competition, if it's the Conference League, for example, and Premier League football, will be a bit easier, if I can say, rather than trying to manage Champions League and Premier League, where Champions League, the fans are expecting your starting 11. Premier League, the fans are expecting your starting 11. It ends up being really, really tricky to manage that. Whereas the European Conference, you can bed in some of the younger players, use the squad depth a bit more, get used to that, sort of whether you have 2 teams, one for midweek, one for the weekend, however you tailor the team going forward. And that will give him valuable experience, I think, for then future seasons when it's now a Champions League versus Premier League and trying to balance that out. For me personally, I think Newcastle should stick with Eddie Howe and as the club grows, he grows as well. Obviously, there's shouts from other people that want maybe more well-known names. I think you're in the camp of keeping Eddie Howe, if I'm not mistaken. Jump in if I'm wrong on that part. But then we can then move on to Wolves versus Brentford and your thoughts on that game.
Yeah, I'm not in any Eddie Howe out camp yet. I think it's far too early for that. But yeah, Wolves against Brentford should be a good game. Wolves are obviously been very entertaining to watch this year. I think Gary O'Neill's done an excellent job. I sort of quite liked him at Bournemouth. I know that there was a lot of, I think the Bournemouth fans weren't that keen. I thought they were very lucky to stay up, and I think there was a degree of that. But you could definitely see that O'Neill had done something to sort of help them stay in the league. If it was just, it did seem like it was sort of a motivational job more than it was a tactical job. But I think we've seen this season at Wolves, he sort of got that tactical side as well. And you can see how much he's learned from that Bournemouth job. And they do seem to go into games with tactical plans. You see the way he's spoken on Monday Night Football in the last few months as well. We went on as guests, was quite impressive there. Yeah, be really impressed with them. I think they're much better at home than they are away, but then they did go to Stamford Bridge and win it last weekend, so maybe they're sort of working on that as well. I think this is a massive game for Brentford, especially as well, because Brentford are sort of precariously positioned in the league. They lost 4 of their last 5. And if you just look at their upcoming fixtures, they've got Wolves away, and they've got Liverpool at home, Manchester City away, West Ham away, Chelsea at home, Arsenal away, Burnley away, Manchester United away, Brighton, Aston Villa, then Sheffield United. They've got a really tough run of fixtures. Out of those, up until that Sheffield United game in the middle of April, they've only really got Burnley that you'd think would be an easy game. That is away from home against a team that, who knows where Burnley will be at that point. They've got a really tough run of fixtures coming up. And they could easily fall down into that bottom 3. And if they do that, sometimes that can just become a self-fulfilling prophecy once you get under the bottom, once you get under that line, especially for Brentford, who've never really been there since they got into the Premier League. It could have a mental impact. We don't know what will happen there. Tony going back has been huge. His partnership with Morpay does seem to be getting better. They do seem to enjoy playing with each other. That Tony's creating chances for Morpay, creating space for Tony. It does seem to be working quite well. But yeah, Wolves are just playing so well at the moment. Cunha, his record this year has been incredible. He's got so many goals and assists, and he seems to be taking his game to a new level. And he's really developing into that player that Wolves thought they were paying, up to 40 million for when they got him from Atletico Madrid. He's been really, really good. Neto's come back from his injury, and I think when he's been fit this year, he's been one of the best attackers in the league. He's just so creative. I think he's one of the top assisters in the league, despite missing 3 or 4 months of the season. So that's really impressive. So this should be a really good game. I think there'll be goals. I think it'll be, maybe it won't be one for the neutral in the way Tottenham and Brighton are, with those 2 teams competing in that top 7, but I think this will be equally as good. 2 really attacking teams. I think Brentford will know they've got to go for this with some of the fixtures they've got coming up. Wolves away, although very difficult, is probably one of their kind of fixtures, so they've really got to target this game, and that could open it up for Wolves, who are so good on the counter-attack. So yeah, it should be really good to watch. Then I'm going to go for another 2-2 draw in this one. I think that there will be goals at both ends, and yeah, I can't split them. I think Wolves probably the more likely winner, but that extra motivation for Brentford and realising how massive it is for them could sort of turn it their way. So I sit on the fence and go for a 2-2.
I'm sitting right there with you. I've got 2-2 written down as well. And just to touch on those fixtures that Brentford have coming up. So obviously this Wolves game away from home. Then next week they have to host Liverpool. And then on the Tuesday they have to travel to Manchester City. And then after that they've got the game against West Ham. After West Ham, they face Chelsea at home. Obviously Chelsea not in form, but you never know, with the players that Chelsea have. This is taking them into March. And then after that, they've got Arsenal at home, an Arsenal side competing for the Premier League. Then they have Burnley away when their games start to get a bit easier. But this is going straight way into mid-March before they sort of see the end of this really, really tough run of fixtures, Jake. If they're not picking up points in games like this, I know we've both given it a 2-2, but Brentford fans will be hoping that they get a win here just to give them a bit of breathing room, because they're not too far away from that relegation zone at the moment. Sitting on 22 points. They've got that game in hand, obviously, but unfortunately it's against Manchester City. 19 points. Could land them in, is where Everton are. So looking at 3-point difference between them and the relegation zone, obviously a couple of teams in between them with Luton and Nottingham Forest. But it is one of those things where Brentford are going to have to start looking behind them rather than ahead of them if they don't continue to, or start picking up a bit more points. 1 win in their last 5 games. Tough times for Brentford. They need to dig in. Obviously, Ivan Toney coming back, as you mentioned, is massive. Let's move on to Nottingham Forest versus Newcastle. And I'll obviously pass the baton on to you as the resident Newcastle fan. Coming against a Nottingham Forest side, they had that new manager Barnes. I don't know if it's still there, technically speaking. Obviously, tough for them with the amount of players that they had away for AFCON and injuries and stuff like that. But you'd surely fancy Newcastle to continue to try and climb up that table. You mentioned the hope to get into those European spots. I think a game away to Nottingham Forest, as tough as it is one of those games you have to target if you do want to get into those European spots.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've got a really big 2 games coming up away to Nottingham Forest and at home to Bournemouth. The 2 games that Newcastle will probably be the bookmakers' favourites for both of them. But they're also 2 teams that have beaten Newcastle already this season. And yeah, on their day, Bournemouth and Nottingham Forest, they're not going to go down. They're not good enough to sort of finish in the top half, but they are tricky teams that can beat anybody on their day. And we've seen that this season. I think the City ground is not quite the fortress it was last season. And I think, yeah, the missing players they're still going to have, it will help us. They've obviously got a game tonight as well, as we record. They're still got an FA Cup replay. So then it'll be interesting how strong they go for that game. And if they go strong, Newcastle, for much of this year, have been the ones that have been fatigued playing these games, but they'll have sort of the extra rest advantage of Nottingham Forest, which I think will be important. The way they beat us on Boxing Day as well was really disappointing. And we do seem to bounce back when a team is sort of seemingly, if we've seen to come out on the wrong side of the result, we do seem to bounce back when we play them next. Didn't quite work out at Luton last weekend, but hopefully it will at Forest. I think our way to be better as well. The Fulham game, we played very well in that game, sort of controlled it, got the result. Aston Villa were very dominant in the first half and then sort of managed the game as it went on. So yeah, hopefully another win away from home, that would be big. I think Forest, obviously got some very good players. I think Aaron Nee coming back is big. He scores goals at this level. Morgan Gibbs-White is excellent as well. But yeah, they don't seem, I think with Nuno, we know what they're going to do. They're going to set up deep and try and counter. And I just think that if they do that, we've got the players to break them down. And yeah, I think the extra day's rest for us compared to Forest, and sort of the disappointment of not beating Luton, but sort of carrying on the momentum anyway. It's disappointing to drop points at home to Luton, but we came back from 4-2 down. So in some ways, we've still got the momentum with us. We've won 2 and drawn one of our last 3 games. We'll hopefully continue that this week. And yeah, I think with every week where we get time on the training ground, we will see improvements in Newcastle. So I think we will win. I don't think it's going to be a great game. I think it's going to be scrappy. Maybe a set piece will win it for us. Or a set piece will get us on our way. That it did it at Fulham in the FA Cup and at Villa. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for a 2-0 Newcastle win, but I don't think it's not going to be a free-flowing football. But yeah, I think we'll have enough to get the points.
I agree with you guys having enough to get the points in this one. I've gone 2-1 though. I like the way Nottingham Forest are playing at the moment, and I do think they've obviously been unfortunate with some of the games that they've had. Obviously, back-to-back 2-1 results. Against bigger teams in Man United and Arsenal. In a couple of weeks back, they had the 1-1 draw with Bournemouth that we mentioned earlier. But I think against big teams, they seem to kind of throw their elbows in there. They're not too shy. They're going to be at home. So obviously maybe a bit more bullish in that one. I think they're going to fancy this one, but Newcastle's quality is just going to come through, and eke a win in this one. I've gone 2-1. As you said, it's not necessarily going to be one of the highlight games of the week, but I'm interested to see the performances of both teams and how that sets them up going on for the rest of the season. Nottingham Forest, 21 points at the moment, one of those teams that is flirting with that relegation zone. Let's move on to West Ham versus Arsenal, obviously that London derby. For West Ham, they look good in terms of position in the league. I don't know if they look as good in terms of performances. Do you put that out more to, obviously, Kudu's going away for AFCON and stuff like that? Or is it just West Ham being West Ham? I don't know what to make of them this season. Every time I look at the table, I'm like, okay, they look in a decent position. And right now they're sitting in 7th place in that coveted 7th position. So very decent for them. But I then look at that performance against Man United, a Man United side that was struggling, and you're thinking, what is going on with West Ham at the moment? And then obviously Arsenal, they'll be bouncing into this one, happy with the performance against Liverpool. That's 3 wins on the trot for them, 3 wins with really good scorelines, the 2-1 against Nottingham Forest, that 5-0 against Crystal Palace that probably started the issues for Roy Hodgson there, and we'll get to Crystal Palace towards the end of the podcast. But I think for me, Arsenal continue the good form, continue putting pressure at the top of the table. I've gone with a 2-0 Arsenal win.
Yeah, I think that's a good prediction. I think West Ham, they do seem to get points. They just seem to just chip away, getting points. They've also got Bowen and Kudos in attack, which are 2 very good players that could play for pretty much any team in the division, I think. The Paquetá being missing has sort of hurt them over the last few weeks. There is hope that he might get back for this game. So if he does, that'll be big for them. But yeah, with the European competitions coming back as well, I think we'll see West Ham start to slip down that league table. I really can't see them finishing in the top 8, really. When you look down the teams in that top 10, I think they're probably the 9th or 10th best team in the league, and I think that'll sort of be where they fall to. But yeah, they've got a massive chance, and they do sometimes pull out big results at home under Moyes against big teams. We have seen it before, but I think Arsenal, after getting that win against Liverpool, I think that they'll really just they'll just find another gear now, and I can't see them dropping sort of points so soon after that game. I think they'll have a lot of momentum, a lot of confidence. And I think that West Ham will try and sit deep against them, try and counter attack. But I think Arsenal are just going to be sort of too game wise for that. I think they're gonna find a way to get a goal. And yeah, if they get one, especially if they get it early, I think it could be quite a routine win for them. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for a 2-0 Arsenal win in this one. And yeah, I think that it should be quite an easy one for Arsenal on the day.
Well, let's move on to 4th place versus 6th place. Aston Villa will be hosting Man United. Villa had that disappointing loss, or, depending on which hat you're putting on, but I'm sure they would have been disappointed with the home loss to Newcastle, especially what happened to them against Newcastle at the beginning of the season, Jake. You must love playing Villa, and I'm sure you're hoping you're playing them every week, but they bounced back with that 5-0 win against Sheffield United, where Sheffield United fans were leaving the ground within the first 20 minutes. I don't know if we're going to see the same from Man United. Obviously, they're the away team. I don't know if their fans, after having travelled, will want to leave after 20 minutes, but we've seen it before with, I think it was Spurs fans. When you guys played them, Jake, I'm sure you fondly remember that game. But for this game, Jake, how do you see it going? A Villa side that's hoping that they've bounced back, and then a Man United side that, dare I say, have some sort of form at the moment. They've got Haaland starting to score goals. I say this with trepidation because I'm not sure how much I can put weight onto United and form and United players and form, considering what we've seen for most of this season.
Yeah, I think you've got to sort of give Manchester United some credit and say they have managed to build up some form. But that being said, I think against West Ham, the 3-0 scoreline was very flattering to Manchester United. West Ham had a lot of chances. Manchester United had their own chances, but they were so clinical, and I think West Ham, over the course of the game, created over 1 more expected goals than Manchester United in the game. So got to be slightly concerned about that. And I think it was against Wolves as well. They conceded lots of chances that day. Created several good chances too, but it was very sort of, they were sort of hoping just to outscore Wolves that day. They did in the end, but I don't know how sustainable that sort of form is. And going up against West Ham, we didn't really see that same level of chance creation, although they did score 3 goals again. They were just a lot more clinical on that day, and slightly fortunate of a couple of deflections as well. So yeah, I think you've got to be somewhat encouraged as a Manchester United fan, just because it is better than what you've been watching. But I also don't think that they've been the 2 sort of dominant performances that you'd want against Wolves and West Ham. And going away to Villa, it's going to be tricky. We've obviously seen them beat Villa already this season, come back from come back from 2-0 down that day. So they've got some sort of form. Villa, I don't think Villa have been really that good in the last couple of months. Obviously, they were very convincing winners last week, but I think any team would have been convincing winners that day at Sheffield United. So yeah, it's a big one for Villa, and it's almost a 6-pointer in the fact that Manchester United are that team in 6th position at the moment. If they win, Villa don't look as secure in that top 5. It is a massive game in that regard. If Manchester United want to get back into the top 5, which will probably be Champions League, they really need to win against Villa. They would go within 4 points of them. So that is quite a big 5 points of them. Sorry. So yeah, it's quite a big swing, and obviously if Villa win, that'll be extended to 11 points. So yeah, it's a massive game for Manchester United. If they win, it does really open that sort of hunt for Europe and finishing in that top 5, especially with Villa having the Conference League coming back soon. It's a huge game, and I think Manchester United have got the players to sort of pose problems for Aston Villa. We saw the way Newcastle did it a couple of weeks ago. They exploited that high line. They got men in behind and they were clinical when they got there. I think Manchester United have the same sort of profile of player. You can see Rashford and Garnacho getting in behind that high line. And if you do give chances to Rashford and Garnacho, they're very clinical. Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one. I think Villa are going to have the better play, and they're going to be the dominant team. But I could easily see Manchester United creating the better chances on the day. So yeah, it's going to be huge. It's going to tell us exactly where Manchester United are, and it's going to tell us, if Villa have regressed somewhat from what they showed earlier in the season. So yeah, I think I'll give Villa the edge, but I'm really uncertain. I think this could really go any 3 ways. I'm really not confident on how I rate either team at the moment. So I think I'll give it to Villa just because of their home record. I struggle to see them losing another game at home so soon after. But then they've got a game against Chelsea tonight as we record. So obviously maybe that extra rest for Manchester United will benefit them. Who knows? This is a really tight game to call. I think it's probably the hardest game to call of the weekend. I think I'm going to just give Villa the edge 2-1. But yeah, really wouldn't shock me if it was a draw or if Manchester United managed to win.
Yeah, I've gone 2-2 in that one. It's that high line for me. I think it's going to suit Bruno Fernandes playing first-time balls over the top to the likes of Rashford. It's just about the decision-making from Man United on the counter-attack, whether or not they can execute that. But let's move on to Crystal Palace versus Chelsea, the last game of this game week. 2 clubs that are in what seems turmoil at the moment. Certainly their managers are under a lot of pressure. What do you make of this? Is this El Sacco? Is this the game that could get someone sacked?
Maybe. Maybe it really could be. Who's to say Pochettino's even in the dugout? We could, if they get heavily beaten by Villa tonight in the FA Cup, that could almost be a turning point. Who knows? So I'll discuss it with the idea that Pochettino will still be there. But yeah, I think even with how bad Chelsea have been, I think that Crystal Palace are in a much worse position. And I just think the doom and gloom there is just so reminiscent of what I've seen at Newcastle in our 2 years where we got relegated. It just seems so similar. There's really no buy-in to the manager. There doesn't seem any real desire to move him on. There's so many players just getting injured and re-injured. The supporters are protesting almost on a weekly basis. It must be a really horrible place to play your football at the moment. Whereas Palace before, the atmosphere has been great. We've also got the Homesdale end where, you got the sort of the ultras there, make a lot of noise. And it's not been like that. It's a lot of protest and it's sort of a negative atmosphere to play your football in. And as bad as Chelsea have been, I don't think Chelsea are bad because they're not playing for the club. I think they're bad because the squad has been put together in a bad way. But I think the talent advantage they'll have on Monday and just the utter sort of turmoil at Palace should lead to Chelsea getting quite a comfortable win. I think that Elise and Eze being out, there's just no spark at Palace. They're going to set up defensively, and they set up defensively in the last couple of games and conceded very early on, and I think it's going to be similar here. I think Cole Palmer, Sterling and Cuckoo, there's too much attacking talent in that Chelsea team not to not to win the game at Palace. And when you take Eze and Elise out of that team, and Decore as well, they just look very average. And yeah, I think Palace are the ones I really fear for. If they keep Roy, as it looks like they're going to, like, I don't see which manager would really want to take that on at the moment. It just seems to be they do really seem to be heading one way. And I think Chelsea are going to win. I'm going to go 4-0 Chelsea. I think it could be that convincing.
Surely they have to do something if that's the case. Obviously, there's the rumours of Gareth Southgate calling it after the Euros with England and him being lined up for that Crystal Palace job, which is why they're waiting and sticking with Roy Hodgson. But you'd imagine if they go down, that deal goes out the window. So it's crucial for them to do well in the rest of the season. But for this game, unfortunately for them, I've gone 3-0 to Chelsea. I think the attacking threat of Chelsea is going to be enough for them to see out this game. And maybe, hopefully, if, we'll see how tonight goes, but maybe that puts a little bit of breathing room for Pochettino, and we see if he can hang on to his job for a couple of weeks forward. But Jake, that's going to do it for another episode of A Tad Predictable. Do you have anything you want to plug, put over, or promote before we wrap up?
You can get me on Twitter at Jake Jack with 2 N's. I'm also I do a lot of stuff for EPL Index, so yeah, check that out as well.
Thank you very much. Doing my job for me from my end, guys. As Jake has mentioned, check out all the content on EPL Index website. Their match previews, post-match review, player performances, all of the news that you guys could obviously wish for heading into the next transfer window, but more specifically, what's going on in and around the Premier League at the moment. Jake, do you have a particular article? Maybe I'm putting you on the spot here, but one that you enjoyed doing recently that you'd want people to go check out?
I can't think of anything recent, but there will be some stuff coming up over the next couple of weeks. So yeah, keep an eye out. I've got a few ideas, but I don't want to spoil them here.
Fair enough. Just keep an eye out for those ones. Guys, go and check out the daily podcast show. It's a 2-footer podcast with Dave Hendrick, where he discusses the hottest topics in football. Finally, also check out flagship show that runs weekly. It's the EPL Roundtable, where Kev De Vries sits down with panelists from respective EPL teams. They do the reviewing of the Premier League. We do the previewing. I was on there last week, so that episode came out, I think, on Monday. So it's still out if you guys want to go check that out. We also go into depth with the whole profitability, sustainability, the responsibility from a financial perspective that the Premier League has been enforcing recently, and why teams have been quite careful not to overspend this transfer window. So definitely go and listen to that podcast. We break things down there. We also give perspective from clubs and how they approached things heading into the window. Guys, go and follow the Twitter show. Go and follow the show, on Twitter at A Tad Predictable. Go and follow at EPL Index on Twitter. Subscribe to EPL Index podcast channel on your podcast providers. Give us 5 stars, write positive comments. That stuff really does help us out. I've been Tadeusz Nakira. You can find me on my Twitter handle at Tad Predicts. Huge thank you to Obi Semenya. He's at John Empire SA, and Jody McKenna. She's at Spursy141 for our guest intros. Our producer behind the glass, Mr. Guy Drinkle. He's at Guy Drinkle on Twitter. He's been Jake Jackman, at Jake Jackman with 2 N's on Twitter. And remember, Chisingaperi, Chinoshura.
And still, Salah, sensational! Son had a go and scored a beauty.
Oh, what a strike from Yuri Tielemans.
De Bruyne! And it's Wood.
Martinelli, gorgeous!
Still going up. Oh, he's done it again. And City have won the Premier League.
Sports Social Podcast Network.